Picture a banner hanging over a Tehran highway. It shows a man's face. Millions have seen this image by now, but almost nobody has heard his voice. His name is Mojtaba Khamenei. Since March of 2026, he has held the most powerful title in Iran. He is, on paper, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, and yet, according to multiple reports, he has not appeared on camera. Not once. Every statement issued in his name arrives as text. No footage, no audio, no proof of life beyond the written word. That absence is the story. Not because it's strange for a leader to be cautious in wartime. It's strange because of what it might be hiding. Is Iran being run by a man too wounded to show his face? Or is it being run by people who prefer him invisible, because a visible leader might ask questions they'd rather he didn't? To understand how Iran got here, we have to go back to a single morning in February. On February 28, 2026, Israeli and American strikes hit a compound linked to the Iranian Supreme Leader's family. According to reporting from multiple outlets, the strike killed Ali Khamenei, the man who had ruled Iran since 1989. It also killed his wife, a daughter, and other members of his household. By any measure, this was the most significant decapitation strike against a sitting head of a major regional power in decades. Imagine the scene inside Iran's security establishment that same morning. Communications down, chains of command broken, a war already underway with two of the most capable militaries on earth, and the man who had sat atop the entire system for 35 years, gone. Nobody had a script for this. Iran's constitution does have a procedure. Under Article 111, when a supreme leader dies or becomes unable to serve, a provisional leadership council takes over. According to the national and other outlets, this council was made up of 3 people: President Masoud Pezeshkian, Judiciary Chief Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejei, and a senior cleric from the Guardian Council. Their job was narrow: hold the country together, buy time, and get the assembly of experts to choose a permanent successor. But here's where the story changes. The assembly of experts is supposed to be the sole body with that authority. 88 clerics, elected by the public, meeting in strict secrecy. In theory, they alone decide. In practice, according to multiple Iranian and international outlets, a very different set of actors moved first. Picture Revolutionary Guard commanders working the phones within hours of the strike. Iran International reported that IRGC officials tried to push through a fast appointment almost immediately, without even waiting for the assembly to convene. That attempt reportedly stalled, but it set the tone for everything that followed. The assembly tried to meet in person first. Multiple sessions were attempted and failed, reportedly due to security concerns in an active war zone. On March 3rd, they finally convened online, and according to assembly members who later spoke to Iran International, the atmosphere in that meeting was, in their words, unnatural. Sources described a pattern of pressure building for days beforehand. IRGC commanders in multiple cities reportedly made repeated phone calls and in-person visits to assembly representatives, urging them toward a single name: Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the man who had just been killed. Then the timeline turned stranger still. Before the vote had even finished being counted, U.S. and Israeli strikes reportedly hit the Assembly of Experts building in Qom. A Telegram channel called ZTV claimed the strike specifically targeted the vote itself. That claim hasn't been independently verified, and analysts remain divided on Israel's precise intent. What is documented is this: the building where Iran's clerics were choosing their next leader was hit while the process was still underway. Think about what that does to a deliberative body. Members debating a nation's future while their meeting room is a potential target. A second session was arranged for March 5th, deliberately located near a shrine in Qom, on the theory that its religious significance might discourage another strike. And here's a detail that doesn't fit the story of a smooth, respectful transition. During that second session, Ali Khamenei's own written will was reportedly read aloud to the assembly. According to compiled reporting on the event, that will explicitly requested an in-person vote, and stated that Khamenei did not want his son or any family member to succeed him. Sit with that for a moment. The man whose death triggered this entire crisis had, according to reporting, left instructions against exactly the outcome that was unfolding in real time. 8 assembly members reportedly said they would boycott the next session in protest, citing what they called heavy pressure from the IRGC. Some warned openly that installing Mojtaba Khamenei would look like hereditary rule, a concept the 1979 revolution was explicitly built to reject. The monarchy Iran overthrew past power from father to son. 47 years later, critics inside the regime's own clerical body were warning that history might be repeating itself. Reuters, citing 5 separate Iranian sources, reported that the Revolutionary Guard Corps effectively forced the decision through, overriding the objections of political and clerical figures who preferred a different outcome. One senior fellow at the Middle East Institute summarized the dynamic bluntly. Mojtaba owes his position to the Revolutionary Guards, and because of that, he isn't likely to hold the same authority his father once did. On March 9th, Iranian state media made it official. Mojtaba Khamenei, 56 years old, was named the 3rd supreme leader in the history of the Islamic Republic. Only twice has this transition happened. Once in 1989, when Khomeini died. And now in the middle of a war, in 2026. Within days, murals appeared across Tehran and Isfahan. One widely circulated image showed 3 generations in sequence: Khomeini on the left, Ali Khamenei in the center, and Mojtaba on the right, receiving a flag. The message was continuity, stability. Nothing has changed. But the way that message was manufactured tells a very different story than the one it was designed to sell. So, who exactly is Mojtaba Khamenei? Layer 1. His religious credentials. Iran's constitution says a supreme leader must be a senior Islamic jurist. Mojtaba's clerical rank is Hojjat Islam, which sits below Ayatollah, the title his father held for decades. Critics have used that gap to question whether he belongs in the role at all. Layer 2. His institutional path. Mojtaba never held elected office. Never a minister, never a member of parliament, never a public administrator. What he built instead, according to research from groups like United Against Nuclear Iran, was influence from inside his father's private office known as Beit-e-Rahbari, a behind-the-scenes power broker most ordinary Iranians had barely heard of. Layer 3. His security ties. This is where his real leverage comes from. During the Iran-Iraq War, Mojtaba served in the Habib Battalion. Analysts note that this unit became a career pipeline. Fellow veterans went on to lead major parts of Iran's intelligence and security apparatus. Those relationships gave Mojtaba something no clerical credential could: personal trust from the commanders who actually control Iran's guns. That's why, when the moment of crisis arrived, the Revolutionary Guard didn't reach for the most senior cleric available. They reached for the man they already knew. Others had been in the running. Ayatollah Alireza Arafi, deputy chairman of the Assembly of Experts, had even met privately with Pope Francis at the Vatican in 2022. But Al Jazeera reported that Arafi was seen as a strong religious figure rather than a strong political one, and in a moment defined by war, that distinction mattered. Hassan Khomeini, grandson of the revolution's founder, was another name floated. He carries obvious symbolic weight, but Iran International reported he had effectively been sidelined for years, barred from running for the Assembly of Experts in 2016. Mohseni Ejei, the hardline judiciary chief on the Provisional Leadership Council itself, was also mentioned as a serious contender. Reuters reported that Khamenei himself had reportedly signaled support at various points for either Ejei or Hassan Khomeini as successors, well before his death. Add to that list Sadek and Ali Larijani, brothers with deep roots inside Iran's judiciary and national security structure. Ali Larijani had reportedly been given expanded authority over foreign relations shortly before the war began, a decision some analysts believe made him a prime target once hostilities started. None of them got the job. And the reason, according to the bulk of available reporting, comes back to the same institution, the Revolutionary Guard Corps. Each alternative candidate carried genuine religious or political weight, precisely the kind of independent standing that could make a supreme leader harder to control. Mojtaba carried comparatively little of that on his own. What he carried instead was decades of personal trust from the commanders who, in the chaos of wartime succession, were the ones actually positioned to decide. To understand why any of this matters beyond Iran's borders, a short technical detour. Iran's system is built around Velayat-e-Faqih, or guardianship of the Islamic jurist. Ultimate authority rests with a qualified religious scholar, not with elected politicians. The president runs the day-to-day government, but the supreme leader sits above him, controlling the armed forces, judicial appointments, state broadcasting, and half the seats on the powerful Guardian Council. The Guardian Council, in turn, decides who's even allowed to run for office in Iran, including who can run for the Assembly of Experts, the very body that selects the supreme leader. It's a closed loop. The leader shapes the council that vets the candidates for the assembly that picks the leader. Analysts have pointed out for years that this circular design means the assembly has never once, in the system's entire history, publicly challenged a supreme leader's decision. Which brings us to the deeper question. Even if Mojtaba Khamenei holds the title, does he hold the power that comes with it? Two competing interpretations, both built on real reporting and both incomplete. The first, Mojtaba Khamenei is a figurehead. According to a security assessment reported by the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs in May 2026, Israeli intelligence concluded that real decision-making authority in Iran has shifted to the Supreme National Security Council and to the IRGC itself, led by Commander Ahmad Vahidi. Under this reading, Mojtaba's job is to approve decisions, not originate them. One senior security official used a blunt phrase: he has effectively become a rubber stamp, providing legitimacy for choices the military already made. The second interpretation is less dramatic, but troubling in its own way. Some analysts argue that describing Mojtaba as a total puppet oversimplifies. He spent decades building relationships with these same commanders. He isn't an outsider being managed. He's an insider who helped build the very network now said to be managing him. The line between Mojtaba's will and the IRGC's will may barely exist at all. Both interpretations agree on one striking fact. As of early July 2026, Mojtaba Khamenei has still never appeared on camera as supreme leader. Picture what that looks like. A funeral procession for his own father, moving through the streets of Tehran, millions of mourners in attendance. 3 of Ali Khamenei's other sons, publicly named as Mustafa, Maysam, and Masoud, shown praying beside the family's coffins, and the man supposedly now in charge of the entire country, nowhere to be seen. According to CNN's coverage of the funeral in early July, Mojtaba is believed to have been seriously wounded in the same strike that killed his father, his mother, and his own wife. Reports on the extent of that injury remain unconfirmed. Some accounts describe him as gravely hurt but mentally intact. Others simply describe an information vacuum, filled mostly by speculation. For days after the February strike, some outlets even reported that Mojtaba himself might have been among the dead. It took time for state media to clarify that he had survived. Analysts have noted an eerie historical echo. In 1981, Ali Khamenei survived an assassination attempt that left his hand wounded, and Iranian state media later used that survival to build his image as a living martyr, a status that helped propel him toward the leadership itself. Whether a similar symbolic narrative is now being constructed around his son is something publicly available evidence cannot confirm. There's another layer, and it involves the outside world's role in all of this. Israel has been explicit that it does not consider Mojtaba's new title a shield. Defense Minister Israel Katz, according to the Jerusalem Center, said in April that Israel was awaiting approval to eliminate what he called the Khamenei dynasty and its successors. That's not a hidden threat. It's a stated policy position, and it explains, at least in part, why Iran's new leader is reportedly governing from an undisclosed location, communicating only through written statements. Now picture the strategic bind. Iran's establishment needs a leader who projects strength and continuity to hold the system together. But the very act of projecting that leader publicly, through video, through appearances, through anything that confirms his exact location, could become the reason he's killed. Legitimacy and survival are pulling in opposite directions. That tension surfaces in small details. According to CNN in early July, Mojtaba's religious rank was reportedly elevated around the time of his selection, a move widely read as an attempt to shore up the constitutional requirement that Iran's leader hold serious clerical standing. If accurate, it would suggest Iran's establishment understood exactly how fragile his religious legitimacy looked on paper and moved quickly to patch it. But formal rank can be adjusted through institutional channels. Public trust cannot. CNN spoke anonymously with a 30-year-old resident of Tehran during the July funeral procession. He described a mixture of anger and exhaustion, saying that despite the scale of the ceremony, nothing had really changed for ordinary Iranians, and Mojtaba's continued absence gave him little reason to expect otherwise. That's not a scientific poll. It's one voice. But it captures something reporting from multiple outlets has hinted at consistently. Public skepticism toward this succession runs deeper than official ceremonies can paper over. The war with Israel and the United States, which began the same day Ali Khamenei was killed, has not simply been a backdrop to this succession. It is arguably the reason the succession happened the way it did. A slower, more deliberative process, the kind the Assembly of Experts was originally designed for, was reportedly abandoned specifically because of wartime urgency. Multiple sources describe Assembly leaders explicitly citing the war as the reason speed had to override procedure. That single wartime decision may shape Iranian governance for years, because a leader chosen under duress, through what several members themselves described as an unnatural process, inherits a legitimacy question that doesn't disappear once the guns go quiet. Now, the harder question. If Mojtaba really is being directed by figures like Ahmad Vahidi and the Supreme National Security Council, what happens when their interests diverge from his? Sources cited by the Jerusalem Center describe decision-making inside Iran as fragmented and slow, with responses to diplomatic overtures from Washington reportedly taking days rather than hours. That's not the profile of a unified command. It's the profile of competing power centers negotiating with each other before they can even respond to the outside world. Let's separate what's confirmed from what remains contested. Confirmed. Ali Khamenei was killed in a joint U.S.-Israeli strike on February 28, 2026. Confirmed. A Provisional Leadership Council took over under Article 111. Confirmed. The Assembly of Experts held at least 2 sessions, one interrupted by an airstrike. Confirmed. Mojtaba Khamenei was announced as the new Supreme Leader on March 9th. Confirmed. As of early July, he has not appeared publicly in any video or audio format. Analysis, not confirmed fact, that the IRGC pressured Assembly members using threats or coercion. Iran International and Reuters report this based on anonymous sources, and the accounts are broadly consistent, but independent verification of internal assembly deliberations remains, by design, extremely difficult. Inference that Mojtaba's authority is significantly narrower than his father's ever was. This view rests on his lack of prior office, his lower clerical rank, and the reported dynamics inside Iran's Security Council. It's a reasonable reading of the available evidence, but still an interpretation, not a documented certainty. Unknown, the precise state of Mojtaba's health. Unknown, how much genuine authority he personally wields day to day. Unknown, whether the current arrangement, an invisible leader legitimizing decisions made largely by military commanders, it is a temporary wartime adaptation or the new normal for how Iran will be governed. Picture a chessboard where several pieces are hidden under a cloth. Analysts can see the pieces that remain in view. The Guardian Council, the Assembly of Experts, the Supreme National Security Council, the IRGC's chain of command. What they can't see clearly is which hand is actually moving them. There's a broader historical pattern worth placing this within. When Khamenei died in 1989, the man widely credited as the kingmaker was Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, an influential politician who reportedly told the assembly that Khomeini had privately indicated Khamenei should succeed him. Even that transition, the one that installed Ali Khamenei himself, involved political maneuvering rather than pure theological consensus. Both of Iran's leadership successions have ultimately been settled more by political power than by uncontested religious authority. A structure built to claim its legitimacy from religious scholarship has, twice now, resolved its most important decision through political and security maneuvering instead. The gap between Iran's constitutional theory and its practical reality may be wider than either Tehran or its adversaries are willing to say out loud. State media reported crowds as large as 15 million people across the July morning period, among the largest gatherings the country has seen in years. That scale tells its own story about how deeply Ali Khamenei's decades in power were woven into Iranian public life. But attendance at a funeral is not the same as confidence in a successor. The residents who spoke anonymously to reporters, expressing fatigue rather than hope, suggest those two things may be diverging sharply. So who really runs Iran right now? The honest answer, based on everything publicly available, is that nobody outside a very small circle knows for certain. It's possible Mojtaba Khamenei is a genuine decision-maker, wounded and cautious but firmly in command, using invisibility as a wartime tactic. It's possible he is largely a symbolic figure, a name attached to decisions made elsewhere, valuable to the IRGC precisely because his family name provides continuity the military itself cannot manufacture. And it's possible the truth sits somewhere between, shifting week to week as wartime pressures evolve. What we can say with confidence is this: the process that put him in office broke from Iran's own stated procedures in ways multiple insiders have publicly acknowledged. The man whose death triggered the crisis reportedly left written instructions against exactly this outcome, and the new leader governs for now as a voice on paper rather than a face on a screen. There's one more thread, and it involves the man who was technically running Iran's civilian government during all of this, President Masoud Pezeshkian. Picture a reformist president, elected on promises of engagement with the outside world, suddenly serving on a wartime leadership council alongside a hardline judiciary chief, while the military decides who gets to be his boss for the next several decades. According to The National, the Provisional Leadership Council brought together Pezeshkian and Mohseni Ejei, two men from very different wings of Iran's political establishment, forced into the same room by a crisis neither of them created. Reports have since circulated questioning whether Pezeshkian's position is even stable. Some outlets have raised the possibility that his government could be sidelined entirely, with real authority increasingly consolidated inside the Supreme National Security Council and the IRGC. Independent verification is difficult, and accounts vary. What's clear is that the presidency, the one part of Iran's government that ordinary citizens actually vote for, appears to matter less with each passing week of this crisis, not more. Widen the lens again, because the succession crisis hasn't stayed contained. Picture the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most heavily trafficked oil corridors on the planet. According to reports from mid-2026, Iran has moved to tighten its control over maritime traffic there, establishing what's been described as a new maritime authority just as questions about its own leadership remain unresolved. Analysts see this as a signal aimed outward, a demonstration that whatever chaos exists at the top, Iran's military intends to keep projecting strength along its most sensitive choke point. Diplomatic signals have been genuinely mixed. Some reporting has suggested that former President Trump has explored direct engagement with Iran's new supreme leader, even as Israeli officials have simultaneously pushed for a harder line. One power weighing outreach, its closest ally weighing elimination, both responding to the same invisible man. That contradiction shows how differently Washington and Jerusalem may be reading this succession. If American officials see value in testing whether Mojtaba Khamenei can be negotiated with, that implies he holds real authority enough to make commitments and enforce them. If Israeli officials see him as an interchangeable extension of an IRGC leadership they've already targeted, that implies the opposite. Two allied governments, looking at the same figure, reaching strategic conclusions that don't align. One more piece of the puzzle. The man widely described as the real power broker behind the scenes, IRGC Commander Ahmad Vahidi. According to multiple reports, Vahidi rose to commander-in-chief after Iran's previous top military leadership was killed in the same wave of strikes that took Ali Khamenei's life. A security apparatus that lost much of its senior command structure in a single day, only to reconstitute itself almost immediately around a new set of officers, many of them second-tier commanders elevated suddenly into first-tier roles. That kind of rapid reshuffling under fire tends to concentrate loyalty and dependency in whoever manages the transition, and multiple sources point to Vahidi as exactly that figure. The same reporting describes Vahidi as central to nearly every major decision since the war began, from ceasefire arrangements to the pace of any engagement with Washington. If accurate, it would mean the single most consequential decision-maker in Iran right now isn't wearing a clerical title at all. He's wearing a military uniform, operating largely out of public view, coordinating with an equally hidden supreme leader through channels the outside world can't directly observe. But this picture comes largely from Israeli security assessments and anonymous Iranian sources speaking to foreign outlets, both of which carry their own incentives. Israeli intelligence has a clear interest in portraying Iran's leadership as fractured. Anonymous insiders may be reformists or rivals with their own reasons to downplay Mojtaba's authority. None of that means the reporting is wrong. It means the picture should be read as the most well-supported available interpretation, not as an uncontested fact. Think about what this means for anyone trying to negotiate with Iran right now. Traditional diplomacy assumes you're negotiating with an identifiable authority who can make a promise and keep it. If power inside Iran is genuinely distributed across a hidden leader, a security council, and a military commander who may or may not agree with each other, that assumption breaks down. Deals get harder to reach and harder still to trust once they're signed. Picture the view from Tehran's own bureaucracy: civil servants issuing permits, judges hearing cases, provincial governors managing daily administration. None of that stops simply because the man at the top of the org chart hasn't been seen in months. Authoritarian systems are often built to survive exactly this kind of vacuum, because so much of their daily function runs on institutional momentum rather than personal charisma from the top. That's why some analysts caution against assuming this crisis threatens the system's survival. Continuity doesn't require visibility. It requires functioning institutions willing to keep operating under an absent or symbolic figurehead. and Iran's bureaucracy has proven durable through previous periods of upheaval, including the chaotic early years after the 1979 revolution itself. Still, there's a difference between bureaucratic continuity and political legitimacy, and that gap is exactly where this story lives. A tax office can keep collecting revenue regardless of who leads the country. A restive public deciding whether to trust a government it never got to properly evaluate is a different matter entirely. The residents who spoke anonymously during the July funeral weren't questioning whether Iran's institutions would keep functioning. They were questioning whether anything about their own lives would meaningfully change under a leader they've never even seen. The picture that emerges isn't one clean story. It's several overlapping stories, each partially confirmed, each still missing pieces. A wounded man in hiding, possibly steering the country, possibly being steered by it. A military command structure that moved faster and harder than Iran's own constitution technically allows. A president whose office once represented the public's only real vote, increasingly on the margins. And two allied foreign governments, reading the same silence in two very different ways. The question isn't simply who holds the title of supreme leader. It's whether a system built entirely around the personal, visible authority of one man can actually function, for any length of time, around a leader the public has never seen or heard. And nobody currently watching Iran, inside the country or outside it, can say with certainty how long that arrangement is built to last.